Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Blumendahl, and I'm a social studies teacher at Waldo Middle School. And my intent today is to present a tutorial on how to use Synergy to set up your gradebook to meet the standards, grading scales, and specific needs of your class. I'm going to go through this very methodically, and I hope that this video is useful for those of you who are new to Synergy or who would like to advance your own understanding of how the system can be used. Truthfully, sometimes it feels as though you need a doctorate to understand how to use it. And until such a degree is offered, I hope this video will suffice in the intro. Now, before I begin, I want to emphasize that I'm using my gradebook, so you're going to see the names of real students with real student numbers here. I am going to trust that you are going to use this video and use this information in ways that will not compromise that information. The very first thing we are going to do is set up our gradebook. So I'm at Gradebook Setup on the pull-down menu under Gradebook. And the very first screen that's going to pull up is going to look something like this. All this already has categories that I have personally created. So if you weight your grades, you are going to need to create grading categories that are specific to each class that you teach. So you're going to do that under Assignment Types. So under the Gradebook menu, you're going to go to Gradebook Setup and then go over to Assignment Types. And that is where you will have the ability to create your assignment types. Now, I teach 8th grade social studies. I've also taught 7th grade social studies, and I teach current events and geography. So what you see here are all the categories I would need if I were to teach any of those classes. So for example, in 8th grade, I have a classwork category. I have an interactive notebook category. I have an academic and content vocabulary category, and then I have categories for each of the 4 units I teach: American Revolution, government, social studies analysis, and equality in the Civil War. So I've created a category for each one. If I want to do that, I'm going to go over here to Edit, and that's going to give me the ability to edit these categories and give them the names and titles that I want. Now, by sequence, it means when you go to a screen that shows your assignments, that's the order in which those are going to show up. So I have all of my 8th grade categories sequenced here at the top. And then I have my 7th grade category sequenced in order based on the numbers I put over here. And you can add as many as you want. So it happens this semester I'm only teaching geography and 8th grade, so I'm not going to use these 7th grade categories, and I'm not going to use these current events categories, but I have them just in case I ever teach those classes again. If you want to change the colors, you click over here. It's going to give you a lovely menu like this. You can decide whether you want the type to be white, or if you click dark, it'll be black, and you can mess around with the colors here to your liking. I'm not going to do that. I trust you can do that yourself. Obviously, you're going to want to have your colors have enough contrast with each other that you can visually discern between the categories when you create an assignment. And at that point, you need to go back to Gradebook Setup here. And so I'm going to pretend like this is an 8th grade class, because this is actually an 8th grade class up here. I teach 4 sections of the same thing. So when it comes to my categories, if I want to assign weights to those categories, I have to go here, and these are all my categories. And so this is the percentage of the grade that comes out on the report card, either the progress report card or the semester report card, that each category will weight. So every assessment I have in the Freedom American Revolution category is going to get averaged into their grade at 20%. Every assignment and assessment in the Justice Government category, 20%. Social Studies Analysis, 10%. Equality Civil War, 10%. All their vocabulary quizzes and assessments will become 20% of their grade, Any classwork we do or warm-ups that we do will become 10% of their grade, and their interactive notebook will be 10% of their grade. So it doesn't matter how many points each assignment in those categories have, the grade will be counted as that percentage based on the aggregate points in that category and how many points the kids earned out of that aggregate. So this is a very specific grading system. If you only use points in your class, or if you only have two categories like homework and assessments, then obviously you might have one category at 80%, your assessments, and the other at 20%, and you'll have a much simpler setup than this. To apply this scale, I go to the bottom and I make sure I check every class that has that particular weighting system. So these are all the classes of 8th grade social studies I will teach during the year, because it's a one semester class. And then I just go to update. Okay. Now I already have this set up, so I will show you. I'm going to go to my 4th period, which is world geography. And that weighting system is already set up here as well. Geography, knowledge, and skills, that's going to be basically their tests and quizzes, 75%, and classwork and application, so their warm-ups and any classwork they do is going to be 25%. And I'm going to make sure this applies only to my geography classes. So I'm going to have a total of 3 during the semester. It's not showing period 4 because I've already got that pull-down menu going up here. It says 4th period. So these are the classes in addition to 4th period that I'm setting that scale for. So I go ahead and click update, and I've now created my weighting and how my grades will be calculated in terms of those book. In other words, when you're entering a score for your assignments or your assessments, what scores can you enter? And so for this, we're going to go to Gradebook score types. And basically your Gradebook score types are what it will or won't allow you to enter for your scores. So if you are a teacher that's using the standard grading system that's been used for time and eternity based on percentages, and you're entering your scores for your assignments or your assessments as percentages, it's very likely you're just going to use the district-wide letter grade system. And then the district has also created a rubric for a 1 to 4 system, which I'm going to be completely honest, I don't like, because the gradations between a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1 are pretty extreme percentage-wise. So what you can do is use one of the district-wide systems that you see here and create a duplicate of it by clicking on the button duplicate. And then you can create your own system, which is what I have done here with my 1 to 4. Personally, I don't think entering a 1, 2, 3, or 4 is specific enough, so I've created gradations in the system for 3.75, 3.5, 3.253. So by doing this, these are the only scores that Synergy will allow me to enter when I enter the value of an assignment. So if I tried to enter 3.83, it won't let me because that's not on this list. For the benefit of you setting up your own, when you click duplicate, you'll see something like this. You're going to want to click on edit, and it will allow you to add new score types. And just like with the assignment types, your sequence simply means that's the order in which they're going to show up for you. So obviously it makes sense for me to sequence 4 as number 1, 3.75 as number 2, all the way down to 0. And then this becomes my grading scale for any assignment or assessment that I enter into Synergy. And when you're done, click Save. Once you click Save, you should actually see your grading scale listed when this list populates. And we're going to go back to Gradebook score types. You should see your list. You should have given it a name, so whatever your teacher, whatever your last name is, and grade scale you could put. And then to make sure that this grading scale applies to all of your classes, you're going to want to go to Gradebook Setup, and Class Settings actually is where you should be. Class Settings. And on the Class Settings page, I'm at home, I'm not on the district, so this is a very slow system. Make sure that you have that grading scale set up for each of your classes. And that should be on your list here. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. And watch what happens here. If I try to enter a score that's not on my list, say I'm going to enter a 3.65 here, it's going to tell me, nope, you can't do that. The only scores that are available to you are the ones you've created. So that's how it ends up working out. Hopefully that's helpful for you. Next thing we're going to want to do is actually create our grading scales. In other words, the scale that will be applied to our assignments when it's translated into a letter grade in the gradebook and for report cards. So for here, you want to go to report card score types across this menu. And what you will see at the top are the scales that the district has created. So the district has created a pass, no pass scale. It has created a standard A through F scale with your standard 90, 80, 70, 60 for A, B, C, D. And it's created this scale as well. Actually, but you may not use that scale, especially if you're using proficiency-based grading. The district has also created its own proficiency-based grading scale. It's right here. But you may have a scale that you want to apply yourself. Whichever one of these is closest to what you want to do. So if you want to have a standard A, B, C, D, F based on percentages, you're going to want to go ahead and make a duplicate of one of the district scales. It has to be one of the district scales that you duplicate, but you need to go in and do that. And then you can create whatever scale you want. I have created my own, which means that when I apply this, this is the translation scale that will apply to my scores. Now I enter everything on a 1 to 4 basis, so I personally have decided I want to get rid of percentages completely so that whenever a student or a parent logs into student view or parent view, what they're going to see from me is a grade point average for my class that corresponds to the 1 to 4 scale. They're not going to see percentages in any way, shape, or form. So I have created this setup, and this is how grades will be calculated for me personally. You may not want to do that. Notice I've given it the title Blumendahl Grading. That way I know when I apply that scale that that's my scale. If I wanted to add or delete any categories here, I could. I think the only other thing I might actually add, I'm going to actually do this for you, is no grade. Sometimes you have a student in your class that doesn't warrant giving a grade because they haven't been there long enough, and sometimes it's valuable to have that available. So I'm actually adding this to my grading scale right now. I'm going to go ahead and insert it, and that has now become a value and score. Oh, sometimes if you make a mistake, it will tell you you need to fix it. So then this should be to 0.49. It's going to be a distinction without a difference, but since that's what it's telling me to do, we'll do it. And it's not letting me do it. You might find yourself similarly annoyed. So I'm just going to go back and leave my grading scale alone because I really don't want to to mess with it. So my grading scale is untouched and undiminished. There it is. If you do your things based on percentages, you're going to want to make a copy of this grading scale and just enter the percentages that you want to apply to your grading system. If you do things on a 1 to 4 basis, you're going to want to do something similar to what I do. And then the important distinction here is when you go to Gradebook final grade configuration, this is what is actually applied on report cards. The easiest way to do it is to set all students to one score type. That way you don't have to go into all individual classes and change things individually. You can just set it to yours. So you can see that mine shows up there as Blumendahl grading. I highlight that, I save it, and that will then apply to every single class I teach. And if it gives you this confirmation, that's a good sign. And then your final grade defaults, if it has your system there, that's excellent. And you can also check each class that you want that to apply to. And that way, when you're actually entering your grades in the gradebook, I'm going to go ahead and enter some random grades here just to show you how it works. I'm going to enter 4, 3, 2, 1, 1.25, 3.75, 2.5. You'll know your grading scale works when you click Save Changes, and the percentages and the letter grades show up as what you want them to be. And in my case, looks like that worked out all right. This is how grades show up for me. So if you're getting alphabet soup or you're getting numbers there that make no sense, you have done something wrong, and I'm sorry. Scales we've created, all the score types we've created, all the assignment types we've created, and all the letter grade configurations that we've created actually integrate into our gradebook so that the math is being calculated correctly and the grades are showing up correctly. So there's two places in which this is important. The first would be simply when you create a new assignment, that your assignment types come directly from the list we created at the beginning of this video, all the different types and weights that you've given it. So the only assignment types that you should use are assignment types that apply specifically to the class that you are entering scores in. If you're entering scores for more than one class, your sections are important. So if I want to apply it to all of my 8th grade classes, I can do this. These would be all of my 8th grade social studies classes, and I can skip the geography classes because they would use a different scale. That would be important to know. Your grading periods. If it's the beginning of the semester, you're going to want to have all 3 of these checked. Once you get past the first 6 weeks, you would uncheck that one. Once you get past the second 6 weeks, you would uncheck that one. And it looks like, miracle of miracles, they've gotten rid of the minis this year. So 3 cheers for that. And there's other things you could, standards correlations. That's more high school level stuff, although actually we should be doing that, but we've never been given any direction about that. So be it. So that would be your assignment type. So I'll call this 8th grade classwork. And your score type, Blumendahl Proficiency is my grading scale. I have it set to default to that. I could choose any one of these others that the district has created. I will not be doing that. I'm going to use my proficiency scale. So that's going to allow me to enter the 4, the 3.75, the 3.5. This is where you choose that. That's extremely important to know. If you only want your scores to show up in student view or parent view when you actually entered a grade, you want to click on for this. And whatever date you want it to actually start showing up on student view or parent view, that you'd enter that here as well. Making sure your due dates are set correctly is important, otherwise that can confuse parents. The other thing you're going to want to do is go to Gradebook Setup, and for each individual class, under Class Settings, you are going to want to make sure that everything looks exactly the way you want it to. And this is the point at which I'm going to tell you how to make sure, if you are integrating with Google Classroom, that it's set up exactly the way you want it to. If this G up in the corner is in rainbow colors, you have given Google Classroom permission to integrate with your gradebook. If it's a black and white G, all you have to do is click on that black and white G to activate Google Classroom access, and then you can configure your gradebook to integrate with Google Classroom. This is a list of all my first semester classes. And so if you want to change the settings for any of them, there's a little box off to the left here. You're going to want to click on that box. So for example, I'm going to click on the box for my first period class, and it is going to let me look at my settings. So first of all, I'm rounding percentages to 2 decimal places. Now, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. It gives you these options. I don't use percentages, so that really doesn't matter. Do you want your final grade showing on parent view? You can choose whether you do or not. Analysis bands I'm actually going to teach you about in the next segment after this, but just so you know, if you want to apply an analysis band, you can choose it right there. I will explain that more in the next segment. This is what matters. This is the scale that will be applied to your gradebook to determine final grade. So I've got that Blumendahl grading scale where I created my own 1 to 4 system and am applying it on the screen I showed you previously. We choose our overall grade from assignments generally at the middle school level. At the high school level, they determine their final grade through standards. So we may eventually get there. We're not there yet. And then, so we have standards mode off. Now, if you want Google Classroom to integrate with your gradebook, this is where you do it. If you click enabled, you will basically allow as much of your gradebook to integrate with Google Classroom as you choose. But you're going to want to click on advanced options here. So the first thing is you're going to want to make sure the class code under advanced options corresponds to the code of the class that you've created in Google Classroom. If you have not yet created a class in Google Classroom and this populates a code for you, it will simply create that class in Google Classroom along with your class list automatically. If all you want to do is have your student roster sync to Google Classroom and you don't want to worry about assignments or scores syncing to Google Classroom, you can turn these off individually. I found when I first set up my gradebook that some crazy stuff was happening. I think I fixed it now, but it's really up to you. If you have all 3 of these on, any score that you enter in Synergy is immediately going to populate into Google Classroom, and when you enter it as a grade in Synergy, it's also going to enter it as a grade in Google Classroom. I personally have not yet figured out if it works in reverse, but it's good for you to know. So if I click Save here, I believe you're immediately going to see Google Classroom start syncing with my Synergy. But because I'm on my home computer and I'm getting the rotating circle of death, that might not happen yet because it's taking a while to populate. But what should happen once you've set Google Classroom up to integrate is you'll get a bunch of boxes showing up in this corner up here, letting you know that that's happening. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, our last little trick is called the analysis band, and basically what this allows you to do is color code all of your grades. So under filters and options, you would go to edit bands, okay? And this is where you can create your analysis bands. So when I enter scores, they're not going to show up in the standard color you see on Synergy. They're going to show anything that's between a 3.5 and a 4 is going to show up as green. Anything between a 2.5 and a 3.49 is going to show up as blue, and so on and so on and so on. You can create a new analysis band here by clicking New, and then it will allow you to edit, and you can come up with titles and numbers for that, so that when you create your gradebook, everything looks exactly the way you want it to. And then when you go to filters and options, you simply apply that band. And if you have a warning threshold below which you want the grade to show up in red because your students are really struggling, you can enter that struggle percentage right here. I'm actually going to make that 30% instead of 40%. You update it, and then when you enter your grades, they will show up in color. So I'm going to go 4, 3, 2, 1. My son just walked into the room, so he may have something to say here. And they show up in color, just like that. You saw it for a split second there. That's how it's supposed to work. Hopefully you find